Right. I'm just gonna do that and start. I did recording. Yes, okay, we're all ready to go. So let's start. So we're just gonna do a quick recap because I did receive some work from some people, and I should mention that too. You know, you do have a couple of. I think they're fairly. You know, they are tasks that you could do pretty quickly. Just in case you missed what those tasks are. Your first one was to mark in the plucking regions into your piece, and then the second task was to orchestrate your piece. And you can just do that, you know, through shorthand. You could say, you know, this line is the flute, and use FL for that, and you know, things like that. So, but I did want to show people what Illay had done, because Illay really did a fantastic job here. And Jill just sent me some work as well that she had done, so we'll take a look at that. But here is Illay's example. So very detailed here. We've got the plucking regions here, and just as a quick recap, especially for Alejandro who might not have seen this information yet, in classical guitar we tend to think of 3 different plucking positions: ponticello close to the bridge, normal, and tasto. But there's some information from the 1800s that suggests guitar players were thinking of 5 different colors, or thinking of a lot of different colors to use, imitating orchestral instruments as well. So they were doing a lot with their right hand. And so we have this kind of methodical way of thinking about it, where we have example A, which is right up near the bridge, and then example B is about, you know, a little bit away from the bridge. Example C is about at the rosette. Example D is at about the sound hole, and example E is right up here. And we saw an example of music where those plucking regions were being changed almost measure by measure from one measure to another. Okay, so so that's a little bit about the plucking regions. So Illay has marked in the plucking regions down the bottom, you know, and they're changing quite frequently. Yeah, from example D to C, and then back to D, and then back to C, and then example B, right? So I wonder if Illay, would you like to demonstrate that for us? If you don't, would that be okay?
Yes.
Yeah?
I'll give it a try.
Give it a try. It's a lot of detail, you know, with the right hand there. But yeah, I'd love to hear it, please. Beautiful work. Yeah, excellent. Fantastic. Beautiful work, Illay. So I really like this example because it has a few things you can kind of play around with that make these colors very clear. But Illay, like, can you talk us through like what you know was behind those decisions there, and maybe talking about if you want to include in, you know, also with the orchestration, the instruments that you've got too.
Since the middle voice is playing in thirds, so I thought it would be a good oboe for the middle.
Yeah.
So the bass, I chose the bassoon for the bass line. Just for the top, I've taken the alto flute because the flute register didn't go as low as the notes here.
Okay.
Yeah,
great.
so I opted for the alto flute, and since we are using that, I took example D, Do not make it too, well, to make it a little softer for a flute sound.
Yep.
And the trombone in, for example, B here, like toot toot, that just fitted.
Yeah, that lower register, the melody. It's basically like an echo of the melody in a lower octave. So definitely suggesting another instrument coming in there. So I love that, and you've changed the color as well to help bring that out. So yeah, that's really wonderful.
I've added in some emphasis on two chords.
Emphasis on those two
a bit
chords.
More.
Definitely. And example C, example D, but you put some emphasis on those. Fantastic. Really like your work there, Illay.
I didn't use any nails in the section because for the flute you use nails already, and when the trombone comes in, it's a bit too harsh if you use your nails.
Yeah. And this is an excerpt of a longer piece, so there might be other sections perhaps where you could use a more of a brighter nail tone, if you wanted to, I guess. But I think for this section, I really like what you've done, and it really opens up the music. It transforms the music completely when you see those thirds in the middle, oboes, alto flute on the top, and a bassoon on the bottom. On the guitar, it's just a chord. But as Illay goes even further in demonstrating here, you can orchestrate it like this. You could actually orchestrate it out into the different instruments like this. So that's what Illay's done here. This is what it would look like if it was an orchestral score. And I think it really helps. I mean, if you wanted to go an extra step in this kind of task, in this process, this would be really, really great. There are pieces too. Maybe I could send this to you all, where you do find some examples of piano pieces or guitar pieces that have been orchestrated and played by orchestras. Think pieces like Lagrima, some of the Albanian piano pieces like Asturias and Granada, and pieces like that have been orchestrated, and it's absolutely. The Chacon is another example of a piece that's been arranged for a full orchestra, and it's a really interesting experience. But to do that yourself, to actually orchestrate it, and now these days with Sibelius and MuseScore and programs like that, you can even listen back to it too. So it gives you at least some kind of idea of how it would sound. So
this kind of worked as a guideline for me, to see how they would all fit together. And then I could play it back on MuseScore indeed.
Yeah.
The flute didn't sound good, and
the flute didn't sound too good, did it?
No.
Some instruments sound better than others, don't they? Yeah. So, what do people? Anyone have any any comments about what Illay's done here?
I think it's really great, but I'd like to hear the instruments a little bit more, which means that I think you probably need to slow it down just a little bit, just to get the benefit of those beautiful tones that you're getting. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, it could be perhaps a bit more exaggerated. It is over with the audio quality. Sometimes it sort of compresses things a bit. But yeah, maybe what I don't know this piece very well, so
Well, it's also tricky to play an oboe at a bridge and a flute at a sound hole at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you sort of have to
So I had to make a choice
make
where
a
to
choice
play.
about that. Yeah. So example D. And then example C. And back to... example B. Another thing with example B, you could do a double stroke, a twin stroke with the thumb as well. That could help even with the flesh. That could enhance that effect too, perhaps. Yeah. But it does take it takes a certain amount of practice to kind of get not only the movements down, but the actual sound that you want to make it really, really clear. Exactly at this point, that's where I get that that exact kind of sound happens at that exact point, and it does take quite a lot of working out and mapping out and repetition and practice, just like when we have a technical challenge. So excellent. Thank you, Illay, for that fantastic work. Really detailed, and really love how you went to this level amount of detail here. That's really great to see. So Jill had just sent me a couple of examples, so this is going to be fresh for all of us. So you had a Mertz piece and a Mudarra. So Mudarra, from the 16th century, a little bit earlier, but these techniques can apply to anything really. It's any style, any period, genre of music on the classical guitar. So Jill, could you maybe talk us through what you've done here, please?
Yeah, sure. Well, as a lute type of piece, I found it fairly flat, and one of the things that I found difficult when I was playing it just normally without any orchestration was playing it in such a way that those notes, especially those notes in the third and fourth, second, third and fourth bars, playing them strongly enough but gently enough to ring right through to those semibreves.
Mm-hmm.
So what I thought might work would be to tambora the semibreve area, to make it kind of last and ring a little bit, with a bit more vibration.
That's
I'm
very
not sure
interesting.
whether it works or not. I'm still working on it, Dan. But
yeah.
But I kept it. I chose this piece because it was kind of on the surface fairly simple, and I thought, well, I wonder if I can take that really simple piece and dress it up a little bit, just with some of those different tones. I attempted, I'm not sure very successfully, the harp section there in the second line. One of the issues that I had was that when I tried to play it in the 17th fret to get that harp-like, and I thought, I'm going to have to change the tone that I want there, because my hands were actually colliding and it wasn't actually sounding very good.
Okay.
So
you went to example A instead.
Yes.
So completely. Yeah. It is. I believe this was originally a harp piece. So it's an interesting. And the Renaissance harp, I think, tended to be a bit brighter than the modern harp. So, this idea of the tambura, the drum, is very interesting. I like it. I like the just giving that kind of thing a go. It's really great to do that. So, would you like to demonstrate this one?
Or maybe just a little bit of it.
Just a bit, even just the first 8 bars, even that repeating phrase here. I think most of you will be familiar with this piece when you hear it, if you don't recognize it from the score.
I'm still warming up.
It's okay. Yeah.
Could put a tambour in there too, I guess.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to hear that again if you did it the first time.
It's cold here in London. I'm still warm. My
That's
fingers
okay.
are still warming up.
That was a really interesting effect. Really, really interesting.
I'll just leave it at that for the minute.
That's great. I really like the tambura there. That
yeah, it needs work, Dan. Sorry.
Totally, never heard anything like it. But I really like. That's very refreshing to hear that. With the harp effect, I noticed that you've changed the position as well that you'd be playing it in. So is it?
Yeah.
Right. So you'd be playing it. Something like that, maybe in the what's at the 5th position. So that could.
Yeah, right up here. It's actually quite hard to play.
Oh, hang on. How are you doing that? Sorry.
On the 17th fret.
17th fret. Oh. That's very interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
That gets a very interesting tone there.
It does, doesn't it? I really
Wow.
like it up there. When I can play it.
Yeah, I've never thought of that.
Never played a C scale up there, Dan.
We never play. Yeah, we very rarely play notes up there, and it does have a very distinctive sound there. So that's another really interesting. If you can make that work, then that's another very just really great. Never would have thought of these effects in this particular example. So.
Another idea is to try to play harmonics.
Yeah, harmonics. Yeah, that could be another one. Yeah,
yes. Yeah, I tried that too, Tom.
Well, you could. You can almost do You can almost do all of them with natural harmonics, just the C, and then the rest can be natural. That's another great idea, Tom. Yeah. Fantastic. I love it. This is great. This is what it's all about. Thinking of these effects, really, really orchestral, totally different to just hearing. different colors that you get. So from that. And then you had another one, which was Mertz here. You're going to do some trumpet effects there. So just in case, this is one of his studies, I think. Yeah, very short study.
Do you know what I found with this one?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, Dan.
No, go on, please.
I found I had to change the positions in order to get the trumpet ringing correctly, because you couldn't really play it in the second position.
So where did you play that chord? Up in the, like up here? Ah. Like that?
Yeah.
That's very good. Oh my gosh. So you've changed the fingering in order to get that effect. Very interesting. Just in case if you missed it, a trumpet effect is produced by an intentional buzzing in the sound. So something like that. Make the string sizzle. So it's more challenging as a chord to do that. So example E, so you're going right up here, and then that'll be challenging to maintain that trumpet sound for a while, but it can be done. And might require and it does require refingering. But another I never would have thought of that myself. I really like having that. You know, just shows you what these tools can be. It's like I said in the workshop. It's like an arsenal. You know, they're like these tools, these techniques that you can use, like Jill and Illay have shown. In your own way. It's really fantastic to see that. So thank you, Illay and Jill. And I hope that inspires some of you who haven't done these tasks to have a go, even if it's just 4 bars or 8 bars, where you can just orchestrate it a little bit and think about those plucking regions and what sort of instruments might be used for that passage. So wonderful. All right, let's dive into some new topics now. So
just a question.
Yes, Illay.
For tutti,
yeah,
in your example from the email, do you use it there to refer to all the instruments depicted in that particular part, being flute, bassoon, oboe, bass? Or do you mean all the instruments of the orchestra?
Yeah, all instruments of an orchestra, probably like a classical symphonic orchestra. So, yeah.
So a really rich sound.
Yeah. Quite a general term, just meaning, full orchestra sound, rich sound. Yep. All right, thanks for the question. All right, so let's talk first about dynamics next. And dynamics and tone, color, we saw some links between the two already. In general, from the quotes that we discussed last time, it seemed that guitarists from classical and romantic periods, when they played softer in general, they would move their hand closer to the fretboard, and when they played louder, they would move their hand closer to the bridge. So there's already a little bit of dynamic, to play with there. But we're going to focus on a few more details here that you can also use, and these can be used really in a lot of contexts, especially the first one, the idea of crescendo and diminuendo. Okay, so we'll spend the most amount of time on that, because this can be applied to any example. And then we'll have a look at repeating passages, because that's often something that people already think about. You know, that if something's repeating, whether it's a phrase or a section or something like that, what are you sort of supposed to do with that? And then short passages of quick runs, we just get a very specific. This is a bit more specific, but there is some information that you can apply there. So, all right, let's go into crescendo and diminuendo, and you might be taken aback at how simple this idea is, but how it's really, really super effective as well. The general rule for applying crescendo and decrescendo was outlined very nicely by Aguado. So here is his quote: "It is necessary to bear in mind the sense of the notes in each melody of the phrase. While they rise, the sound gradually is intensified and tends to decrease when they fall." Czerny tells us that this rule must be observed even where the composer has not indicated the style of playing. Where the composer wishes for the opposite mode of expression, it must always be expressly indicated. So seems like this was the sort of default, and we even have quotes going back from the Renaissance and Baroque periods as well, that sort of I guess it's just a continuation from there into the classical and romantic periods. If you look at the music of Tedesco, Mario Castelnuovo Tedesco, look at his guitar music, you'll probably notice that pretty much every melodic line that's going up, he actually puts in a crescendo, and every melodic line that's descending, he puts in a decrescendo. He's gone to an awful lot of trouble to do that, and it's something that seems to be maybe a natural part about music, but to have these quotes, I think, just gives us a bit more, justification, shall we say. So that's it's very, very simple, but applying it can get very, very detailed, but it has a really, really effective execution of the music. The music becomes really shapely. It loses that kind of static quality. It's always moving, and a good composer will use different types of phrasing, different melodic shapes. So if you're playing music by a really, really well trained, experienced composer, you'll see all of these different shapes happening. And here is one example, Saw's Study Number 1, Opus 31. So I've just marked in some of the, Saw didn't mark in any dynamics. Does that mean we don't play with any dynamics? I don't think so. I think we have to keep this in mind. We need to bear in mind the sense of the notes. So when the notes rise, we crescendo, and when they fall, we decrescendo. So we see in this first section, we have these very prominent arches there. Yeah, you see how the melody rises and falls there, and then that happens again over here. That's probably one of the main features of that first section. And then in the B section, you see the melody is just gradually dropping. So we can do a nice a longer scale decrescendo at that point. So let me demonstrate this for you. Okay, so that's the effect there, and there are other places where you could continue with that idea, maybe to a slightly more subtle degree. There's this little melody here that's slightly rising up, right? So you could do a slight crescendo up there. Towards the end of this section, the melody's it's kind of moving around in various ways there. So, but I think those are the main features of those two phrases, of those two sections. Is this information, does this surprise anyone, or is it something you've already learnt about, heard about, something you already do? I'm curious to know.
I'll say I find it difficult to incorporate quite so many crescendos, decrescendos, and to be changing quite so much.
Yeah. It's very constant. I mean, if the melodies, the melodies move by their nature, so it's a pretty constant sort of a thing. Yeah, and it does take a certain amount of again, practice and craft to sort of get that.
Yeah, thank you.
Illay?
I already read the book quite time ago now, so I knew about it, and I like to apply it to lots of pieces.
Yep. So you found it very applicable. That's great. David, were you about to say something before?
Oh yeah, I was going to say I've been doing this a while. My teacher mentioned it, but I do find, looking at bars 2 and 3, it's quite hard to get a crescendo and a decrescendo. Just within just the space of a bar. You need almost like a few bars to make it effective.
Yeah. I can give you all a bit of a strategy for that. So I like to think of dynamics as a very relative sort of a thing. So almost like thinking of like a staircase or a ladder, where each note is a little bit louder or a little bit softer than the previous one. Right, so starting. I think if you think that way, if you do think that way and craft the shaping to that sort of extent, then I think you can get a cushion. I mean, does it come across if you try it out, or when you hear me play it? Can you kind of hear that rising and falling? Is it pretty obvious, pretty clear? Yeah. So, do you want to have a go, David, at these couple of bars here?
Yeah. Don't know if that noticed or not.
It's pretty noticeable. Yeah. I think if you could go maybe all the way to the B there, please, and make sure those last couple of notes keep going down. I feel like you've reached a point. Just a little bit lower would be great. A little lower on those last couple of notes. One more time, please. That's great. That's very noticeable. Very noticeable. It requires a great deal of control, doesn't it? When you get louder, to make sure the tone quality sort of, I find it very easy to compromise the tone quality a little bit when we get louder. And then one of the things I notice on the guitar is that maybe we're a little afraid of getting soft, because we're already a soft instrument, and I do this myself all the time. So crescendos tend to be very obvious, but decrescendos, especially at the end of a phrase, it's like we just don't, guitar players, we just don't always go to all the way to that last note, that decrescendo. So that's just a couple of things that I've observed in my own playing and just in general. So, but hopefully that kind of way of thinking is helpful, and it'll allow you to make shapings, crescendos and decrescendos, even within one bar. So,
Dan, just a question on those two bars. It's obviously crescendos and decrescendos are working with the melodic line, but there is a bass voice going on there as well. And the bass voice, it's not a lot to it, but it's going in the opposite direction. So would that make any difference to your thinking on particularly that D in the second of those two bars, as to whether you would want to play that stronger, like the G at the top of the crescendo, or would you be thinking of keeping it quieter, like the E in the previous bar?
Yeah,
it's another complexity.
It is. And I think it will depend on the context. When you play music, maybe by Bach, the voices can be very, very independent, and you do sometimes see one voice really going down, one voice going up. I mean, we're kind of seeing this here, but I think the important word in the quote by Aguado, he does use the word melody. So I think it's primarily the melody. If the melody were in the bass, then that's the one that we would be basing it on. So it's primarily the melody, and in this case, I feel like the bass can support what the melody's doing, rather than go in the opposite direction. But you might find examples where there might be sort of two melodies at one time doing different things, and then that does add a level of complexity, because in an ensemble you'd be able to do that quite easily. The melody going up, that person can do a crescendo, and then melody going down, that person can do a decrescendo. But on one instrument, it's quite a complex thing to do. So
that's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, my pleasure.
But when the bass goes down on guitar, the crescendo on going down with the bass is very effective.
Yeah. I think so too, because in this particular case, the voices are really opening up. So we get contrary motion. So the top line's ascending like very quickly, and the bass voice is going down, and that contrary motion is kind of exciting to hear. So I think crescendo further brings that out. All right, so that's it's very very basic information in a way, but applying it is really, really something. And I spent a couple of years studying with Paul Odette, who was an early music lute player, and this is probably the main thing that we worked on together. And it's something that I know, like I knew it in my head. I knew this kind of way of playing, but actually doing it, committing to it, and making it obvious and clear to the listener is quite a challenge. It requires a lot of control, and you have to listen very, very carefully to the sound, to the volume that's going on in your playing. So I'd love to take a look at an example. Kevin, you sent me Carcassi's Etude number 7 from Opus 60.
Yes.
Yeah? I'd love to apply this to that one, because it's a really great example for that piece. Let me get the score up. Would be all right if you had a play of it for us?
I'll give it a shot.
Give it a shot.
Yeah. One of the things that I think somebody else mentioned earlier on is that when you start adding things that you've never added into a piece before, the piece kind of falls apart, doesn't it? For a while.
Yeah.
And I think I've got where I put on my score the examples B and C and D. I think I got them the wrong way round.
Okay, that's all right. No worries.
So the score I had some dynamics marked into it, so I followed those essentially. Let's have a look. Okay, so
Beautiful.
Something like
Yeah. Maybe just that. Yeah. Wonderful. Great work there. Now I think I remember seeing the score that you sent me, and was it like a modern edition or?
No, it looks like pretty much the same edition you've got
like
there.
this one.
I just taken it out and put it into Sibelius so that I could work on it a bit.
You put it into Sibelius. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's got it does have some interesting markings in here already, and they seem to line up with what we were saying with following the shape of the melody. So you know, sometimes it's indicated, often it's not indicated, but yeah, Carcassi's in, you know, this descending line here, decrescendo, and then the rising line here with the crescendo, and Kevin was, you know, doing those things, but also using color to sort of further bring those effects out. So lovely. Could we
one thing I found in doing it, having played the piece in the past, I've tended to play it without using the dynamics but not putting the color in. And adding the color in has made such a difference to the piece. And it's harder to play at the moment, but it's going to make the piece sound much better, and it helps to bring out the dynamics even more.
Yep, definitely does. I mean, even in these first two bars, you know, the very, very striking effect can be produced, which is what you were doing, and I'd love to just do that again, just for everyone's, just so we can sort of soak it in a little bit more again. Just those first two bars, please.
Okay.
Yeah, great work. So it's very challenging with what Kevin's trying to do there with, you know, moving the arm from that, you know, and continuing that arpeggio pattern, but it definitely, you know, with practice, it's something that just takes working out and practice, just like technical challenges, right? Just like we do with technical challenges. So I wonder if we could make it like maybe choreograph it even more, so that, because I feel like when you get here in the second bar, you're sort of floating around a little bit. I know it's probably something you've done fairly recently, but maybe if you could. Sort of make it a bit sort of more choreographed, so that you're starting here, and then in the second bar, you could even think of like one, sort of like we did with the colors, with the dynamics. You could think of like the first chord is, you know, example B, and then example C, example D, example E. Maybe just thinking in that way might, you want to give that another?
Yeah, sure. All fingers and thumbs.
It's okay.
I get the principle of it.
That's the idea. Fantastic. And then you can do the reverse in the next bar. You're here, and then you can go. Right. So I think that's a really great. I love how you've blended that color, the idea of changing color with the dynamics, and I think that's my guess. I mean, I can't say for sure, but from what we've studied, all the quotes and all the information, I think that's what Carcassi probably would have done, something along those lines. Yeah. So that was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Kev.
Cool. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
My pleasure. Okay. Does anyone have a passage that they'd like to give this a try with? Adding these dynamics and colours in. bit shy now. Anyone have? David, the piece that I sent you as a suggestion, I think the opening sort of four bars or so could be applied. We could apply this sort of information. Do you think?
Yeah, I think so. What kind of thing did you have in mind? Just trying to think.
Yeah, or just yeah.
Something like that.
That's it. Beautiful. Yeah. I guess just because that melody is just so beautifully, and it's fairly straightforward in terms of the direction of the melody. That's really great. Yeah. So we've got this descending sort of phrase here, and then another one, sort of a sequence of it, but it starts higher. So maybe that second one could be played with a different plucking region, perhaps. You want to give that another go for us, please? Yeah.
Whoops. Something like that.
That's great. Beautiful. Yeah. And then for the next 4 bars, what do you reckon here? If we take that idea of following the shape of the melody, what's the melody doing here in the next 4 bars in general?
It's staying relatively static, I think. It's not moving too much.
Static's going on static on the E, and then it starts to go. Beautiful. Well, I love that color you got there and that final chord. That's okay. No, it's very challenging. All of these movements and extra details. As Kevin said, even if it's a piece that you know really well, and then you start to make these changes, it does make it very challenging. You did a great job, especially at the end of the phrase. That was a really wonderful color shift.
I only picked it up about hour and a half ago.
Yeah.
I'm really winging it.
So you're doing a fantastic job. So I think if you all heard that, nice crescendo up there, and then a decrescendo at the end. And what do we have again? We have variety in the dynamics. We get 2 phrases that decrescendo, and then this final phrase we get a kind of an arch shape going up and then back down. So, David, do you want to play maybe one more time from the start to the end of the section? It'd be lovely to hear. And if you want to take it a little slower, that's all good too. Yeah, beautiful. Great job. I especially love what you do with that last chord. You're sort of getting this harp-like sound by sort of flicking towards the. Yeah, that's really lovely. Perhaps the first phrase could start maybe in a warmer, like an example D or example E, perhaps, like maybe up here. And then the next one, maybe an example C or B or something like that. Could we hear? That'd be nice to see what the effect of that is. Yeah, that's the idea. Really nice. Beautiful. You really hear these sort of 3 different phrases when you do that. Excellent job. Thank you, David. So, what did everyone? Any comments about that one? I think it's a really great example to study this idea. Has anyone played this before or saw these studies before?
I haven't played this one. Before, but I'm going
Karen,
to after hearing David play it.
And Kevin, yeah. Oh, they're fantastic. I mean, these are really great. I mean, I should send these all to you as well, because perfect for applying this kind of thing. If we look at the first study, for example, in this collection, you see the potential here for shaping, dynamic shaping. All right, we're getting that. Yeah, so getting those rising and falling melodies, and then in the next phrase we get something that we'll talk about next, repeating passages. Okay, anyone else have an example they'd like to play? I'd love to. I think this is probably the most applicable and most important aspect of dynamics here. It can apply to every single melody that you play, so it's something I'd like to, if we can, it'd be nice to spend a bit more time, maybe one more demonstration from someone would be wonderful. If anyone has can be something very basic,
Shall I have a go? Yeah.
Sure, Illay.
It's another piece from the 3 pieces from Studio for Mudarra, just like the other one I played.
Is that by who is that by? Sorry.
Mertz.
By Mertz, okay.
So this is the number 1.
Beautiful. Let me get the score up so we can talk about that. So that's number 1, was it? Did you say? Okay, number 1. Hang on a sec. This is from School of Guitar. It doesn't look like it's number 1. What number is it? It's number 13.
Oh well, I just have. I think I just have a collection of
number 1 from number 1 from probably a smaller collection. So I think this is the one. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So could you talk us through what you're thinking here, please, Illay?
Just something. At the start of your edition it says piano, but at the start of mine it says forte.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Okay. Yeah. Conflicting information.
Well, there's a big rise in the melody from the start to at the end of bar 3.
Yeah, to the F, to the G here. Yeah. A big rise in the melody.
You get a repeated passage over there, and that one says piano in mine.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. So we get a rising melody here, and then in general, I think following that, it looks like we get a falling melody there. So we get this really big crescendo through there and a decrescendo here, and that sort of the conflict. Is that the addition you're using? Is that like a modern addition? Do you know?
I think so.
Yeah.
It's from the timepieces, the collection of pieces I think it is a modern edition.
Okay, yeah. See, modern editions sometimes either they delete all uh, dynamic markings, or sometimes they flip them around. It's really interesting. I've seen some where they do the opposite of what was in the earlier editions. So I think starting piano kind of makes a bit more sense in terms of the melodies rising up in the first 4 bars, and then to do this forte, I guess you've got these big chords here. So the chords perhaps could, the chords could be forte. You could kind of orchestrate that in a way, maybe with an example B, closer to playing that closer to the bridge. But then following that, it's kind of starting to decrescendo. So
then goes back up again in the second line.
And then bum bum ba bum ba-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-bum-bum. Yeah, it's kind of going up there to the E, from the C to the E there, and then falling down there. So once again, we do have, although it's the same type of dynamic shape, the amount of the time frame, the time scale that the shaping's happening is quite different, isn't it? This first dynamic shape of the crescendo decrescendo happens over quite a number of measures. I think it's about, what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 measures, and then the last 2 or 3 we get one final kind of little arch shape in the last 2 or 3 bars, right? So sometimes you have to sort of think in a lot. You have to really look in a high level of detail and sort of come to some kind of decision, like what is the melody? Can we say that it's just going up and then going down? Is it clear enough, or is there something about the melody that's a little ambiguous, or not so straightforward? Sometimes you find melodies like that, but a lot of the time, if you study the intervals, look carefully at the notes, really carefully, really observe carefully, you should be able to find a nice decision there to make. So could we hear that one more time, Illay? So we'll put that all into context.
I'll start piano this time.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Wow, yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Great job, Illay. That was that's really nice, really great example.
There's also a good example of an ascending line in the second section.
Okay, do you want to show us that one? This ascending line here. Yeah, we get these ascending lines followed by the chords. So that could be another chance for orchestration. Yeah, ascending lines followed by the chords. Yeah, want to demonstrate that for us, please?
Sorry.
Lovely. These are also really great examples. I'll send this to you too. I'll send this method book to all of you. This is Mertz's Guitar School. At the end of the method book, he's got these really charming short pieces, but really, really very charming and well composed, and lots of variety. And so I think you could have a lot of fun. They're not too probably not too difficult for a lot of you to just kind of pick up fairly quickly. So thank you, Illay. That's wonderful. Well, maybe is there one more person who'd like to have a go at something? It doesn't even have to be classic, necessarily from the classical or romantic periods. If there's something you feel like this information would apply well to, a guitar piece from any time period.
Daniel, I'd like to have a go, but not today.
Okay.
I've only just put it together because I only joined this morning, and then went to a wonderful exhibition of Van Gogh.
Oh,
wow. The light digital version where they have them on huge screens, and so
cool. That sounds great.
I'm not ready. It's not that easy to pick up.
No worries.
But I'll go next time.
Next time we can. Yeah. Next time. Does everyone feel like they can apply this information to the music that you're working on? Yeah, I hope that's because this is really the most applicable one, I think, out of what we're talking about. This really applies to anything you're playing, and it adds a whole dimension, of thought and dynamic shaping to what you're playing. So, all right, well, let's talk about a couple more dynamic possibilities here.
Puts a whole new shape to them, Dan, I think.
Yes, it does.
Some of the studies are fairly kind of academic, and then when you explain those little nuances that you can add to those pieces, it turns them suddenly into the most beautiful pieces.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very well said, Jill, and I couldn't have said it much better than that. That's exactly how I feel about these easier saw studies and these Mertz studies. There's really a lot of scope for bringing them to life through using tools like this. And this just these two things where we're changing the color and following the shape of the melody adds a lot. It adds a lot of detail too. It's like technically to play one of these studies, if you just played it as it's written, without this kind of detail, it's not, super sort of a difficult thing to play. But then when you add this musical detail, it's all of a sudden, it's the whole grading system kind of, it's like these pieces then just become really challenging. But I think in a really fun and rewarding way, and a personal way too, because we all do these a little bit differently as well. Especially if there's no markings there in the score, we can sort of do these in a different color and tone and the amount of shaping we use, and we're only talking about dynamics. There's lots of other and tone colors. There are a number of other topics to discuss too. So let's have a look at another couple of these dynamics we can do. So the next one here, which is I think also very applicable to everyone, is the idea of repeating passages. Okay, so Sherney had a nice summary of this. So in general, every repeated passage should be played the second time with a different style of expression from that which was given to it the first time. It is of course understood that the player himself must introduce this expression even when the composer has not indicated any. Okay, so again, maybe fairly obvious to many of you. You might have heard this. I know with guitar playing, we tend to, this is maybe one of those opportunities where we think, all right, I can, I'll use a different color or a different dynamic if something's repeating itself. But I'm curious, is it, for anyone here, is that new information? Is that, does it kind of take you aback, or is it something you're already pretty familiar with? Some nods, maybe, yeah, like probably familiar. familiar with this already. So here is an example by Fernando Sor. Well, at the end of his study number 9, opus 6. So we get so we just get those repeating passages, those repeating phrases there. And in this case, I'm doing an echo, but Czerny doesn't specify what to do. He just says that the second time it should be played with a different style of expression. You could even do the opposite. You could do a crescendo or a louder. You could play it louder the second time. So again, we get a little bit of scope here for adding our own personal touch to it as well. And you might be surprised at how many repeating phrases there are especially in classical romantic music. I can think of a couple of examples, but before I say those, does anyone have examples that they know of that they're playing where you've got a repeating phrase, or maybe even a repeating like little bit of a section or something? But particularly if it's a passage or a repeating phrase, you might have to dig out your music or again, it doesn't necessarily have to be classical romantic music. Maybe while you're all digging away, I can see a lot of you digging away into some music. I'll tell you one example, and you'll probably be aware of this already. It's Lagrima, right? Lagrima has a repeating phrase here. So this is something we can do, and it's not indicated in the score. Tárrega does not indicate any dynamics in his manuscript or in the early editions. So we have, there's 2 bars at the start and they're repeated. So according to Czerny, we should play the second time with a different style of expression. So that could mean a whole host of things. You could do a soft echo. You could do a loud statement the second time. You could do more rubato. But in terms of, we're sticking to dynamics more specifically. That's just maybe does someone know? Is someone familiar with Lagrima? Maybe you want to demonstrate those first 4 bars. Should be something, a lot of you, one of those pieces that
Here we go, Dan.
Yo, awesome. Thank you. Beautiful, excellent. So I heard you went a bit closer to the bridge.
Went to the bridge
for the second one.
I think it's actually nicer when you're nicer playing it as an echo, really.
As an echo, yeah. I think so too. Personally, I like that. But I guess there's a couple of ways you could do that. You chose to go to sort of example, maybe we'll call it example B. There, and maybe you were playing the first phrase quite tusto, quite warm. Maybe we could say example D, perhaps, something like that. So you could do it. That's definitely one way to do it. You could also flip it around as well. You could do example B to start and then example D for the echo. Do it. You want to try that and just to compare, just to see what the difference, what the effect of that is, please.
So D.
Yeah, beautiful. That's really nice too. You did both of them very tastefully, very convincingly. So, you know, this is the thing. This is a lot of different options, a lot of different ways here. You could even, maybe it doesn't...
This is nicer.
You like this one more? Yeah, okay.
Sorry, I think the second version is nicer, isn't it?
Yeah. You could even do example C, there's a subtle difference, and then example E. So starting at what we would probably call normal tone color, sort of around the rosette area, and then example E is right up the fretboard here. You want to just try that one? There's a third option.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that was beautiful. I like the sound that you got. The example E was very, very, gosh, what's the word? Velvety, very velvety sound there. That was really nice. But you know, there's no. What I'm trying to point out here is that there's no sort of right or wrong. It's that you can really explore a whole host of, you know. So it's like color. It's like paint, you know, painting with tone color. You can get different shades, and those different shades have a different effect on the listener. So wonderful. Thank you, Jill. Any I mean, that's a very iconic piece. So I'd love to hear anyone's thoughts about that one. Is that something you would have thought of doing already, or does that sort of surprise you that what the effect of that is? Or
I like working on that, Dan. The question I would have is having played the different versions and experimented with them, would you then settle on this is the way I do it? Yeah. Or do you just keep experimenting and play it differently every time?
That's a very good question to ask. And I think that might depend on the person playing. Some people might like to have, I like this one the best, I'm going to stick with that. Some people might like to have different options, and whatever, you know, however you're feeling the particular time you play through it, you use one of those options. Or I think that if you practice in this way, you kind of just get used to desiring those different contrasts, and then it sort of happens a bit more naturally without having to necessarily plan it in so much. But the planning can help a lot, because I always find that if I'm reading a score that has markings like crescendos and forte and piano, like, and we're saying, oh, you know, Bach wrote, you know, Bach didn't leave many diamonds, so like, you know, Saw, for example, if he puts a forte and a piano in the music, it's like we're really gonna commit to that because it's written down. So I find, for me personally, I find writing it down helps me to commit to something, but at the same time, I don't want to be too stuck in it. I don't want to say that's the only way I'm going to do it forever. And it might change over time as well. You know, like you might, for a few months, you might like it one way, and then a few months later, you might think, oh, maybe reverse it or change it up a little bit, and just to spice it up, just to keep your own interest with the piece going. So, but it's a very good question to think about.
Yeah.
Tom?
Yeah, personally, I keep experimenting, you know, like, and the more competent I feel playing a given piece, the better I remember it, the more adventurous I am with my experiments. Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I'm kind of uncertain, and I play carefully, yeah, and the more confident I become, the more kind of experimenting I do. And also, when I was playing in front of the audience, the acoustic of the room also was influencing what I was doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also the type of audience. If I play for young people and children, that I can go to really pianissimo, without worrying, somebody may have hard time hearing. Yeah. If I play for older audience, then I am kind of more careful, with how much pianissimo, I do. So it's a little bit of everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's some good thoughts there, Tom. And I'd agree as well. The acoustics of the room, the sort of feedback you're getting with the audience, how you feel that particular day, could all influence what you do. But I think when we're practicing, it can be really helpful to, like, what I've been seeing from all of you is just a very deliberate kind of a practice where you're very aware of what's happening and striving to kind of bring out these effects. And sometimes I think when we practice, I'm speaking, I've experienced this myself a lot. It's like you just go into this kind of cruise control. You're just playing through, and you're not really. So I think if you set some time for planning and writing things down and thinking and and really striving to make these effects as vivid as possible, I think that's a really positive thing to do. And whatever decision.
My observation is that all the interpretation and icings on a cake, as I call them, they come when you become really competent with any given piece.
Mm-hmm.
Then when you're competent playing it, practicing it, that you can play different versions, even when you practice, try to find out, what you like. And I notice that when I'm in a sentimental mood, I play very differently than, first time in the morning,
Yeah.
So the same piece, so it's can't help. We are humans, so that is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's right. Thanks, Tom. All right, so let's talk about one more aspect of dynamics here, and it's very specific, but hopefully it will be of some use to you, if not now, at least at some point in the near future. Short passages of quick runs. Right, so if you have short passages of quick runs, this is something, a general rule advised by Carl Czerny. Short passages consisting of quick runs and intended to be played forte are generally executed crescendo, both in ascending and in descending, so that the last note may receive the emphasis. Okay, so generally a quick run will basically, whether the melody is going up or down, that's what he's trying to say here, whether the melody is going up or down, you'll do a crescendo so that the last note receives emphasis. Okay, so I have a few examples here. This is sort of study number 3, opus 6. So quite a challenging one to do this because we have to slur 3 notes in one go and then crescendo to get the last note to have emphasis. So that. And I think he's going into this kind of detail because just earlier we discussed if a melody, is descending, we do a decrescendo, and if it's going up, we do a crescendo. So this kind of is a sort of an exception to that guideline. Here is another study by Saw, Etude 14, Opus 29. So we get these runs after these repeating short staccato chords. Oh, sorry. Alright, very exciting little gesture. And some of these runs do go down in the piece. So whether or not they go up or down, you can do this crescendo and make them very exciting. The last note gets emphasis. I didn't demonstrate it super cleanly there. And then this is study number 15, Opus 29. Tom, do you have a comment?
Yeah, there is a problem in this, because if there are passages that are very fast, it's much more difficult to play them loud. From the speed technique point of view, playing, taking a little bit of volume off, make all the passages easier. But you are correct that accenting the last note, is very doable in every passage. But the technical passage, you had a workshop on speed, and this is very valid, a limitation. So what applies to piano does not necessarily apply to guitar. So you have to be very careful, about setting the volume too high, otherwise you set unnecessary technical difficulty.
I think that's a really good point to make. You can do a crescendo, but make sure that you're not starting, at a loud volume, because you will find it difficult to execute fast passages. I think even on the piano probably is the same thing as well. Maybe not to the same extent as on the guitar, but yeah, definitely a good point. You want to start make sure that you're playing light, as Tom said I did a workshop on developing speed. So, Karen, do you have a comment or question?
I feel that the emphasis is partly there because there's a rest directly afterwards. So the last note is emphasised by the fact that there's a silence very quickly afterwards. As the idea of trying to increase, particularly with a slur, how do you actually increase the volume when you're slurring?
It's more difficult on a modern instrument too. If you've played romantic guitars, they're a little softer for slurring. Slurring speaks a lot more easily than on a modern guitar. So I think it's even more achievable on a romantic guitar, but it's still something you can strive for. I think on a modern instrument, you can still. If you do it the right way, and there's a lot of control, which you pluck that first note very soft, and then try and put a nice crisp bit of attack. Yeah, and I think it makes this study really valuable because you're doing that over and over again, and it's a very careful. It requires a very careful regulation of your technique to do that. So,
okay.
Thanks, Karen and Tom. So yeah, there was that second example, and then one more. Excuse me, one more here. Also by Saw, Etude 15, Opus 29. So we get these sort of runs in the bass here. I think these are a little bit easy. Well, these two examples a bit more straightforward than these ones with the slurs, I think, to do this effect, but. So right, yeah. So it's a bit, I think this one's probably the sort of the most straightforward out of the three. These ones you have to cram in a lot of notes very quickly. These ones you've got the slurs to control. These ones are a little bit more easy to control. For that kind of shaping. Okay, so if your piece has short passages of quick runs, you can have an experiment with that sort of guideline there. whether the melody is going up or down. Adding a crescendo, emphasizing the last note. Does anyone have a passage that they'd like to, that they're working on, that might have this kind of effect in there? Short passages of quick runs. One, not now, not something you can have a think about. I'm just having a look because I think it was Jill with a G who was working on variations on a theme by Mozart, if I'm not mistaken. Trying to think if there might be opportunities there. Do you think?
There is in the Piumoso movement of it. There's quite a lot of short runs.
Piumoso.
That bit.
That one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's yes. That's a great example, and a very iconic, probably Fernando Sauce's most well-known piece as well. So with these with these passages here, these short runs of short passages. Yeah, you could do it. Would you like to demonstrate a little bit of that for us, Jill? I know it's not the easiest passage.
I'll try. Just
Please.
a little bit. Okay.
Yeah.
Just the yeah. Oops. Oh, I'm trying to read your music. Sorry.
Good, nice
It's
job.
quite difficult to get dynamics in as well. Think about those at the
Yeah.
same time.
One idea I have is if you can maybe try to think of the crescendo, I guess the grouping of the notes. I'm hearing a little bit of a pause in between this group and then those notes there. I wonder if it's possible to get. Oh, sorry. So that last note's really connected, or that these notes really sort of almost flow into that one. Yeah? Yeah, that's the idea. And then if you can try not to put too much volume on that first note as well. Start it really soft. So it's almost just like a little rocket almost. Ba-da-da-dum. Good. Could we just stick on? Sorry, could we just stay here for one more minute? Can you also make this almost like an accent, like da 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 dum? It's getting there. Yeah, that's great. Just be careful of that gap again as well. Yeah. That's it. That's the way. Yeah. Excellent. And then maybe you try this group here, please. One more time. Maybe this. I feel like this one you could really get a crescendo. Through the arpeggio itself. This one is more like a sudden accent, I think, and then this one you can really crescendo through the right hand up that arpeggio. Yeah. That's great. So that, you know, if you just kind of kept doing that consistently with all of these groups, which is not an easy thing to do because they're changing registers and changing chords and numbers of notes that you do and all that kind of thing. But you did a fantastic job with those first two groups. So yeah, try to maintain that. And then do you see some scope for orchestration as well in this variation in terms of tone colors?
Yeah, I hadn't really looked at it that closely. I think it needs some sort of contrast, doesn't it? But
yeah, and how, like, in what is this? Because I'm sort of seeing you've got this kind of high group of notes, and then it's answered by a low group of notes. So maybe that could be, you know, that sort of color change could bring out some sort of effect or orchestration, or something like that. So yeah, so that could be another, and that's another thing to, you know, choreograph into the practice as well. So to get, yeah. So there's a lot of detail, isn't it? When you
yes, not to think about that one.
lots of detail, but yeah, that was really wonderful. So
Well, that's very helpful.
all right, thanks. Yeah, my pleasure. Okay, that was good, a great example. So okay, why don't we take a few minutes break, and we'll talk about articulation next. Okay, so we'll be back. Let's take a 3 or 4 minutes break, and I'll see you soon. Okay, if you don't mind heading back to your chairs, please. And we'll be talking about articulation. Alrighty. Okay, so there's a separate volume on articulation. It's not too long, but I think the scope is quite great here for what you could do with this information, and it kind of took me aback when I found it as well. Just like with tone colors, there's sort of more options and more variety than I was ever imagining. So with articulation, from studying numerous sources for guitar and other instruments, it seems clear that 19th century musicians were varying articulation a lot. So articulation is the shortness or long length of that you play a note. Articulation today is usually categorized, I think, into three basic types: legato, normal, and staccato. Would you all sort of agree with that? Is it, yeah, you sort of think of those three, yeah? Just sort of like, it was interesting to think that with tone color, we tend to think of three: Ponticello, normal, and tasto. But there are actually five plucking regions. Just like with plucking regions, there are five types of articulations that are outlined in numerous sources. So Czerny's piano method does reveal some guidelines, and then we have some other information and sources we can use too. So Czerny divides articulation into five categories: Legatissimo, Legato, Mezzo Staccato, Staccato, and Marcatissimo or Martellato. So we're going from extreme length of articulation to extreme shortness. So we've got all five different degrees of articulation. And I love this. Czerny says, between these 5 degrees of expression there lie innumerable shades and modifications. Just like with tone color as well. You know, we've got 5 different plucking regions, but within those there's all sorts of shades and modifications you can get. So let's have a look at these effects. The first one, Legatissimo, and I've also called it Campanelas. Each note is given a duration longer than is actually prescribed in the notation. This kind of touch is applicable only to arpeggioed chords. So I think the guitar lends itself very well to this kind of texture, arpeggioed chords. So this kind of touch, this kind of articulation can be applied often, and you probably do it already. Sometimes it's indicated in notation, you know, certain notes or certain notes will be given certain values. So Fernando Saw here has gone to a lot of trouble to kind of, indicate some of these notes being sustained for longer, for longer than we might think. So the Legatissimo is usually excuse me. The Legatissimo is usually indicated by slurs and ties, as also in general by the word itself being added. So sometimes you'll see the word being added or something similar. And it is besides also to be employed in all such passages as contain a touching melody in several parts or a richly sounding succession of harmony. Such passages are generally played with these dynamics. Pianissimo, piano or mezza voce, half volume, seldom loud or really loud. So lots of information here just about this one type of articulation. I think the most important thing is that each note is given a duration longer than is actually prescribed in the notation. So, I can think of quite a few examples. This is a pretty well-known source study as well, and we have to really hold if we were going to be pedantic about this, we say, okay, that B is a quaver, and that's a quaver, and that's a quaver, and that's a quaver. Are we going to play those as like, as short note? I don't think that's really practical, right? So this is where this kind of legatissimo touch, where you actually hold all of the notes for longer than they're indicated, and on the guitar, it's a fairly, I think, obvious in this kind of writing. It's fairly obvious, but sometimes, sometimes it is overlooked, or it's not done to the fullest extent. I guess what I'm trying to say is you need to be very careful, because it's very easy to stop notes, isn't it? As we all probably know, the slightest touch of the right hand on a string or the slightest lift of the left hand can just instantly stop a note from ringing. So pay very, very careful attention to that every single note is being held for its kind of fullest value, that of holding it for as long as you can. Another example I think of is the first movement of La Catedral by Agustin Barrios. Same key as well, B minor. Right, just that kind of absolutely sustained texture, sustained articulation. So etudes are very typical form to find arpeggioed chords in. So, there's another example you could apply this. Another example that's very well known, Villalobos etude number 1. It sounds kind of obvious, but to let those notes ring. You don't want to be stopping any of those notes, because it does change the effect, I think, of that arpeggio. So another way of producing legatissimo on the guitar is through campanelas, which is a type of effect which basically means it's like a bell-like effect. So this is when you play notes across strings rather than along one string. You play the notes across different strings. So this is an example by Aguado of a campanelas. Rather than, right? The effect's very different, isn't it? If you play it that way compared to, right? So it gives you an idea. And I think a lot of you're probably all at least a little bit familiar with that technique called the campanelas or campanella. Yeah, it's a great option. Sometimes you'll find certain passages that can be refingered, like this one. They can be refingered and have a completely different effect. That's due to that legatissimo kind of articulation. Okay, so anyone have any questions about that one? No questions. We might have. Oh, Jill? Yeah.
Not a question per se, but I did try the campanelas this week, and I found it a real brain teaser for my fingers. that particular one is changing the patterns quite a bit, and things like that. So it's a good one. It's a good one. It's a good little study for it. Yeah, it's a good little study. So, but it also shows that sometimes I feel like there are some misconceptions that particularly in classical music, of classical guitar music from the classical period for guitar, so Saw, Giuliani, Aguado, that they were using, fingerings in the upper positions as much as possible,
right? That's something that you hear, and there might be some research to sort of support that statement, but I think there's possibly some opportunities to add this kind of effect into something, especially if a fingering is not indicated in the score. Then it means, well, Aguado left this in his method book as a particular technique, so it's something that we could try to do it. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Legato. So the legato, by this kind of touch, passages of melody and closely connected successions of harmony are to be executed on the guitar, and the player, by strictly holding down each note until the next one is struck, must, as far as the instrument will allow, endeavour to imitate the effect of the human voice or the smooth tone of a wind instrument. The common legato is indicated by slurs, and it must be employed in all cases where the composer has not indicated any particular expression, for in music the legato is the rule, and all other modes of execution are only the exceptions. As we already know, the legato consists in this, that every note is held down according to its full duration, and the keys, or we could say frets, are not to be quitted until the succeeding note is actually struck. In this manner must be executed every melody, every passage, in several parts, and every run, however rapid. Okay, so Schoene's really advocating for legato as a sort of a default articulation to use, and I think that's pretty standard for us today as well. He's comparing it with the human voice or the smooth tone of a wind instrument. But I like the kind of detail he's going into on a technical level. He's strictly holding down each note until the next one is struck. It sounds very, maybe very obvious in a way, but it's something that, staccatos can really creep in, can't they, into our phrasing if we're not careful. Yeah, just that slight lifting, that timing of the finger to lift off the fret, and it it can create a really sort of staccato effect on the guitar. So this has a possibly, and this is where symbols and signs sometimes you have to kind of do some guesswork. You can't always know for sure, but this could be a sign for legato to be used here. And it's interesting because this phrase starts on the A, but the sign is kind of starting here. It's an interesting, Right. So maybe. So as much legato as we can achieve there. As to what you do with that A, whether it's slightly detached or if it's still as legato as possible, question you can ask yourself. But here he's got all of these notes within one, and this could be a phrase marking. It's not, phrase marking. Is it legato? Is it phrasing? There's no way of knowing for sure, but it could be an indication for this kind of effect. This legato. Another consideration with legato is when smoothly connected passages of octaves occur, the player must endeavour to produce as perfect a legato as possible. The same rule applies to full chords when they are also to be smoothly connected. So here is one example by Legnani, Caprice number 7. It's lovely. Quite challenging to get those legato because of the nature of these big chunky chords shifting down the neck like that, down the fretboard. So it's very easy to play it staccato like that, right? But to play it with as much legato as you can becomes quite challenging. Same with these chords. Right, it's very easy for little staccatos to sort of creep in, isn't it? Yeah, and Tom's saying sort of, yeah, legato is the main challenge for most guitar pieces. Yeah, very easy for staccatos to creep in when we might not want them to. So there's some about legato. That's the second level. So legatissimo and then legato. The next one, mezzo staccato. The mezzo staccato, or half-detached touch, occupies the middle place between the smoothly connected and the pointedly detached kinds of touch, and gives a certain emphasis to each note, without, however, connecting it to the rest of the notes. Notes struck in this way receive a peculiar significance and importance, which, particularly in slow movements, no other kind of touch can possibly impart. So now it is indicated with this symbol, dots with a sort of a phrase mark above. Okay, so there is an example here where I think it could be used, where you do this kind of half detached touch. But let's have a look at these ones here, because these are actually marked. These are actually notated with this. Maybe I'll just go to this one here, because you get a mix of articulations, right? So you can see here, this is by Mattiega, and you can see how he's using this with this staccato dots, but also with that kind of phrase marking underneath. So you end up with something like this. That sort of effect, yeah? So okay, and you might be wondering, how do how is that achieved? I think this effect can be really a bit more naturally done when you actually use the left hand. You kind of lift, because it's half detached. If you use the right hand to try and stop the notes, it tends to sound a little too short, perhaps. So you can use the left hand to produce that effect. So there's the mezzo staccato. And there's a bit more information about that here. Let's go to the next one, staccato. The pointedly detaching of the notes infuses new life into the music, and the fatiguing monotony, which the constantly connecting the notes would at least assuredly produce on the hearer, is avoided by the occasionally detaching of them and by the little points of repose which this produces. They really used a lot of words back in the 1800s, didn't they? It's very it's very long, flowery sentences. The staccato style is indicated by dashes over the notes, or by shorter durations of the notes than usual, followed by rests. So it is to be understood as a rule that when these dashes occur, each note is to be held down for only the half of its duration. So about half the duration. If you see dashes over the notes, we'll see those soon. But another way that a composer might be indicating that is something like this, where you have a note value followed by a rest. So that might be indicating staccato, and that's roughly about half of the notated value. So instead of that, it would be something like, right? So that really brings the phrasing to life, I think, by doing that. Another example of where you might find staccato being used: when 2 or 3 notes are connected together by a slur, the second or third note is to be played detached. This one I really like, because it adds it adds a lot to the phrasing. If you play this, if you can have a play through even just the first bar of this yourself, it's really nice. So what you want to do is, we've got these groups of slurs here in twos, and so the suggestion is that the second note of the slur is to be detached and not legato. And this is especially in this case because it's followed by a rest each time. You see those slurs are followed by a rest. So if you stop, if you make that second note of the slur short, it produces a really great effect. Rather than which is easier to play too. Rather than just legato, right? It makes a very, very big difference. The music starts to speak when you do those shortened notes on the second slur there. So,
Dan,
yes.
How are you achieving that sort of slowing up? You just put
similar to before. I'm just releasing the left hand by releasing the left hand. I'm creating that detached articulation. It's a good question. It makes it very tricky. It makes it very challenging to play something like this and do that consistently with all the different fingerings, and sometimes you've got to do bars, and sometimes you've got open strings. If you have open strings, then you need to use something else. So if there's open strings, like here, we've got... So there I'm kind of planting my left hand to mute. I'm sort of muting the strings with my left hand there. So lots of... but it's a lot of fun. You get this really great effect, I think, when you do that. So that's staccato. Let's go on to Marcato or Staccatissimo. This is the shortest and most pointed manner of detaching notes. It may be carried on till it amounts to the martellato or hammer-like percussion of them, in which the notes are struck as short as possible, appearing and disappearing with the rapidity of lightning. This mode is indicated by perpendicular dashes or strokes over the notes, which in playing must be carefully distinguished from the dots, which frequently occupy the same situation. So if you see vertical slashes like here, dashes, that is a slightly different articulation than the dots, right? Dots are for staccato, and vertical dashes are for staccatissimo. So it's basically as short as possible. So in this Giuliani Caprice, we have those, I think, fairly clear here, those vertical dashes underneath the notes. So let me try and demonstrate that here. I'm trying my best to play as short as possible. This example here is really great because we actually see both staccato and staccatissimo being used. So over here we have the staccato dots there, and then a bit later on over here, staccatissimo, right? So those ones shorter, which is really, really interesting. Espressivo, but with the short. Let me give this a go here. Okay, so there's lots of great, wonderful details in this example with the articulations and the dynamics, the rhythms, the slurs, it all combines to create a very rhetorical, like a very speech-like manner of execution, right? I think that's what they were striving for, musicians of this period. Another example. Oh, Jill, do you have a question?
I just wanted to ask, Dan, with the martellato,
Yeah.
the vertical strokes, do you have to play that really near the bridge to achieve it, or?
I don't think you have to. I might have been doing that because it's a forte dynamic. I don't think it's necessary to do. You might, like in this example, it's espressivo, so you probably want to use a softer. A softer color, perhaps. Depends on the context, I think. Yeah, so this one was forte, the character of that. I think playing closer to the bridge sort of suits it better, but good question. And loud passages of octaves, skips with chords, and other similar passages must in general be executed in this way. And I find this funny because earlier Czerny was talking about how legato should be the default, right? But then he gives so many examples of when we should be applying different articulations that you realize you really have to look at the music and think about, like, well, what articulation could suit this passage, legato, or in this one it's not indicated. There's no articulation indicated. However, Czerny says loud passages of octaves should be played staccatissimo, right? So that's really interesting because it's not marked here. So that's sort of rather than as legato, rather than playing it legato, could be intended to be executed staccatissimo, as short as possible. And that's also very challenging again because we have sometimes open strings and that kind of thing. So and then another way to achieve this is by damping the strings with the right hand immediately after they're struck. And Pratton and Peltzer mention this effect, and it's called étouffé, and it can be used in So's Etude as seen below. So this is a description of the effect where you just put the right hand fingers right back on the string straight away, and that could be played. This Etude could be played in that manner. Especially for this, if you look very carefully, some chords are marked this way as crotchets. So I think those, excuse me, I think those are intended to be longer in their articulation, and then like there's that E there. So he does give you some variety of articulation throughout the Etude, but I think the majority of it is supposed to be played with this kind of shortness. Really cool effect, isn't it? When you play it like with that type of articulation. You see the rests there, and you might it doesn't have the same kind of effect, the same kind of impact, I think. So to conclude, I know we're running over time a little bit. To conclude, obviously there's lots of information here just on articulation, but one way you could practice this is by applying them to scales. And Czerny is actually famous for his collections of scale exercises for the piano. But he suggests that we use scales as a tool for practicing such effects, including articulations. I think this is what's misunderstood about his exercises, is that he wants you to practice things like dynamics and articulations using scales as a tool for doing that. You could imagine, with a scale, we've talked about following the shape of the line when it's going up and down, crescendo and decrescendo. You could use scales as a way of practicing that. You could use scales as a way for practicing different changing different tone colors. And you could also use scales as a way for practicing these articulations. So you could play a scale with campanella fingering. So rather than that, and then go through the different articulations. Legato, so just a normal, legato articulation. Holding, that means on a technical level, holding down your left hand finger for as long as until you're about to go to the next note, right? If you lift the finger any earlier, the note will be shortened. Something like that, right? Rather than, it's a very slight, again, just like with dynamics, we're talking about very, very subtle, slight gradations of manipulating the sound. It's the same with articulation. It's very, very slight, we have to, yep, Jill?
Just got a question on practice, Dan. Sometimes, when you're practicing scales a lot, they kind of lull you into a sense of comfort. I'm just wondering if, do you find it's helpful to kind of take your group of semiquavers, each beat, and do it a slightly different way, like a legato and then a staccato and then a legato?
Definitely, yeah. You could mix it up if you wanted to. Yeah, for sure.
So
you
could
do.
Hear the difference.
4 notes, campanella, and then 4 notes mezzo staccato, and then 4 notes staccato. That's a great idea. Definitely. Just like with dynamics too, you could do 4 notes piano, 4 notes forte, the next 4 notes mezzo forte. Yeah. That's a good suggestion, because it's always helpful to have some kind of point of reference. Just like I was talking about earlier with dynamics, if you think of it like a ladder, each note is getting progressively louder or softer. You've got a point of reference. And same with articulation too. It's kind of relative in a way as well. So yeah, good point there, Jill. So yeah, mezzo staccato. So that's sort of a half detached. Yeah. And staccato is a short articulation. And you could notate it. You could think about it either this way, where you've got a note and a rest, or you could imagine the dots above the notes as well. That's another way of indicating it with dashes. This is the thing. So with the symbols, you get a lot of conflicting information. Like sometimes this is actually indicating legato, and sometimes it's indicating staccato. So it depends on it would just depend on the context of the composer or the country or the time. So you sometimes see dashes, you sometimes see dots.
It is actually Marcato, or it's a different things for different instruments, those signs.
Yeah, different instruments, yeah. So just have to be a little bit, just whatever the context fits best, I think. If you have to decide on something, you're unsure, just try to look at the music and see what the context, is dictating. And then Staccatissimo you can practice as well, as short as possible, which is really fun, I like Shoney's description, like the rapidity of lightning, So it's a lot of fun when you get those different effects going. Okay, so just as a summary of that articulation, we had 5 different degrees of articulation: legatissimo, legato, mezzo staccato, staccato, and staccatissimo. And unless a composer has indicated otherwise, or context is dictating something else, the legato is the default articulation. There are some effects peculiar to the guitar, such as campanelas and étouffées, that can produce different articulations. And you can use scales as an exercise for practicing the 5 degrees of articulations. Okay. Any questions about articulations? Probably given there's a lot there to think about. And same with the dynamics as well. And so with dynamics, we talked about following the shape of the melody, and then repeating passages, and then short runs of quick notes, short passages of quick notes. Okay, so lots to think about. I think if you have any takeaway from today, if there's just one thing to sort of take away that you can apply, I would say it's about following the shape of the melody. I think that can really apply to any musical context, right? Look carefully at what's the melody doing, and I'd encourage you to actually write it into the score. And I'd like that to be the task for this week. Okay, so if you take a passage and write in terms of crescendos and decrescendos, some of you have already done dynamics in terms of forte and what example you're playing in. But if you can write in crescendos and decrescendos and pianos and fortes, if you've got repeating passages, and I'll send you information about that. But that's your task, and it'd be lovely to see that next time. Maybe we can talk through that next time. I did start a Facebook group. I realized though it might have been set to hidden, and maybe none of you were actually able to see it. But if you want to join the Facebook group, and I'll send a link to that too, we could use that as a platform during the week to sort of stay in touch and sort of share, some of what you're doing with your tasks, and you could even demonstrate, take a short video or something of you attempting to, do whatever it is you're writing out in the score. So I'll send you links to that. So Jill, you tried. Okay, all right. So it should be visible now because I realized I had that setting on. So I'll send you all the link to that again, and hopefully that'll be working. And I look forward to seeing you throughout the week, possibly on Facebook. If not, I'll see you all next week, same time, same place. All right.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks a lot.
Jill says she's totally inspired by Illay. Me too. Illay's always just demonstrating an absolute commitment to what he does. And you saw, if you all saw the tasks that he did, and he kind of went a step extra. I didn't actually ask to orchestrate the instruments out like he did, but Illay decided to do that, and it's really fantastic and inspiring. So thanks Illay. All right, thank you everyone. I'll have a good week. See you next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.